Our next guest had a chance to ask a few of them. He's the president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, and he joins us on the phone. Tom, good to have you with us, sir. Thank you.
Hey, Vince, good to be with you.
Look, I've been one of the people who've wanted better moderators and questioners at these Republican debates, and the RNC apparently heard the call, and putting Tom Fitton in there seems like a very good idea. Were you pleased to be a part of the debate last night?
I was. And, of course, I was. Judicial Watch is the country's largest government watchdog group. But it ought not to be a controversy that a group like Judicial Watch is involved. And I was just thinking about this, not even before the debate, but it occurred to me afterwards in thinking about how it went. The left is angry, right? They're angry I was there and Judicial Watch was there. You know why? Because it smashed the media monopoly on these debates. You had an independent voice come in and ask direct questions about issues that voters care about. The unbridled corruption and abuse by the Justice Department and abusing Trump while protecting Joe and Hillary, et cetera. And the election integrity crisis that, people don't think the last election was legitimate. Certainly Republicans don't. And they're concerned about the 2024 election. The media doesn't want to talk about any of that. And this is why you need independent voices like Judicial Watch. And if during the general primaries, they need to have more people like me asking questions.
And let me just add to this that Democrats, when they lose elections, don't think elections are legitimate. So anyone who's governing the country, who has the responsibility for handling these big systems, should be wanting to instill confidence in those systems for everyone, not just Republican voters, of course.
Yeah, and you can be sure the rhetoric coming up to the 2024 election, especially Trump is the nominee, the left will start talking about how Trump can steal the election as they did in 2020.
Yeah.
So this is you can bet they will revert to form.
Exactly. Yeah. The Postal Service is going to steal the election for Trump. It's so crazy.
Oh, yes.
An amazing saga. All right, let's play some. Let me play your questions last night. Your first question. I want to ask you how this was done because they played your question, a pre-recorded question, and then they threw it to Chris Christie first. So here's Megyn Kelly introducing Tom Fitton last night.
Got to move on to this. Now, by arrangement with the Republican National Committee, we've got two questions for you about the Justice Department and our election system. Here's Tom Fitton with Judicial Watch. Governor Christie, this one's for you.
President Trump and many of his supporters claim federal law enforcement agencies have abused his civil rights for the last 8 years by, among other things, spying on him and now prosecuting him while having treated Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden with kid gloves. A recent Gallup poll shows that Americans think more highly of the U.S. Postal Service than they do the FBI or Justice Department. What would you do as president to restore the faith of the American people in these agencies?
Well, first off, I'm the only person on this stage who's actually done a job in the Department of Justice. I was the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey.
And so he goes on and on, basically says, I'd make sure there would be no political considerations. We go after actual crimes. But did you know ahead of time that this question was going to be posed to Chris Christie?
I didn't. And I don't know if the intent was to limit the answer to only Chris Christie. So that was curious. And his answer was a little bit different than I expected, given his early rhetoric, and he didn't really challenge the concerns that I expressed about the targeting of Trump, the abuse of his civil rights, and the crisis that's resulted from the rule of law.
No, in fact, he dignified all of the prosecutions of Trump. He spent the whole debate, other than this answer, he spent the whole debate saying that Trump is paying the consequences of his own actions, and we should not have him as our president, and that's ridiculous.
And I don't want to toot. Well, I will toot Judicial Watch's horn. It frankly shows the value of having an independent voice there. I'm not a media person in the traditional sense. I'm the head of a watchdog group, and he took the question seriously, and he didn't do the usual response he had, and that to me is, kind of shows again the value that when you have people there that represent the grassroots, these candidates are going to pay attention.
Yeah, well, I'm glad. Like I said, I'm glad that question was put to him. But to your prior point, I wish the whole stage had an opportunity to answer it, because it is one of the most important issues in front of us, and it's not just about the harassment of Trump and going easy on these Democrats. It's by extension, and certainly in practice right now, about the assault on people because of their sincerely held political views all across our country by the Justice Department. And Trump is really, in many ways, just the most high-profile example of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because we were talking, your audience should know, I was talking with Vince a little bit before we began the conversation here. And, the question is, what is the editorial process here? And, I initially wanted to ask two questions, right? And they got back to me and said, look, we don't object to either one, but if you ask two, they won't answer either and go off on tangents. So the second question I would have asked is, should we defund the prosecutions of Trump? And I still want to know the answer to that.
Yes.
From them.
Yeah, I'd love to know the answer to that question. But can I ask, when you say you had an editorial process, who was the person that had the say on this, or who was the editor? Was it News Nation, their network? Was it the RNC? Who was in charge here?
Well, I drafted the initial questions with my colleagues at Judicial Watch, and the RNC invited Judicial Watch to participate, but didn't direct our questions at all. And I submitted them to our friends at News Nation, and they looked at them and made some editorial suggestions and changes, and which I agreed with.
Okay.
So it was a collaborative process, and it worked out well in the end, because the point I made in the initial questions was made in the edited questions, which were more edited for brevity and punchiness and to ensure that we get good answers to the questions, which is what our goal is.
Cool. All right. Let me move to the next one here. This one.
If you're an editor, you know how important editors are to this process.
Yeah, they don't always improve things, but when they do, you cherish that editor, no question.
Right.
Let me go to the next question that you asked last night with excellent editing involved, and it involved our election system. Here is Tom Fitton last night.
Many Republicans are concerned about the legitimacy of elections. A federal judge just ruled that Pennsylvania must count undated mail-in ballots, and unlike Alabama, many states still don't require any identification to vote. What should states do now to increase election integrity and voter confidence for the 2024 election?
Well, Tom, thanks for the question. Thanks for what you guys do at Judicial Watch. It's really, really important. There's a lot of corruption in this government. You guys are doing a great job. What you should do for election integrity is do what we did in Florida.
I knew he would say that, by the way, but I'm glad he got the question. And I'm glad you asked it, especially with the detail that you included, Tom, about what these states are actually up to and why people don't have confidence in their elections. This is another obvious piece where the corporate press, the left-wing press, they don't mention what is happening in states like Pennsylvania, and yet you do. That was excellent. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and it's important because it's front and center. This issue becomes irrelevant after the election, right? So I didn't want to ask a question about what they were going to do as president. I wanted to know what their position was going to be as candidates who have obviously a direct interest in the outcome and the management of elections, the administration of the elections. 15 or so states, I don't know the exact number, don't have any voter ID at all. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking tiny little states like Delaware. I'm talking California, Pennsylvania, New York, etc. And how does that increase confidence in election outcomes? And Alabama's got strict ID laws. There are ID laws in, I think, 30 plus states, but surely not enough. And given what happened in 2020, and the controversies in the administration of the election that led to a loss of confidence in the outcome.
Yeah,
I think the numbers and prepping for the debate, 70% of Republicans think that the election was stolen. Numbers around there. And that's got to be addressed. And how is it going to be addressed by these candidates?
Yeah, that's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And this is, the idea, voter ID is overwhelming support among every demographic in the country. There's not a demographic that doesn't support voter ID. They all do.
That's in the 80% range.
Yeah. And if you are a government official or an elections official who does not support voter ID, it's because you want to cheat or you believe that cheating is helping you. That's the only explanation. And yet, so across the country, we have all these problems. These can be addressed and resolved. Jimmy Carter was a part of an entire election commission in the early 2000s that concluded that we need paper ballots and we need voter ID. And yet Democrats to this day refuse to sign on to that program and they insist that actually black voters would be suppressed by it. It's just not true. Look at what happened in Georgia. They added a voter ID requirement to even the mail-in ballots and black turnout increased. It's a scam, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, election integrity increases voter confidence and turnout. And, if I were running for president, certainly if I were running as a Republican, I would at least be trying to say to people whose vote I'm asking for, I understand how you feel about the 2020 election. I share your concerns, and this is what we're going to do to ensure it doesn't happen again, like in 11 months. Right. And I think there's urgency there, and hopefully, questions like this begin a different type of conversation about these issues as opposed to some of the sidebar issues that arise in debates.
Well, all of these candidates have an obligation to talk about this issue, and that includes the frontrunner, Donald Trump, in my view. Donald Trump should be talking about it in the way that you're talking about it right now. Here's what we can do to make sure this election is on the up and up and that people can have faith in it, correct?
Yeah, and that's a challenge because I don't necessarily have a clean answer as to how it can be done, right? Maybe some things can be done, maybe some big things can't be done. And we're just going to have to grapple with the lack of confidence and suppression as resulting from that lack of confidence in voter turnout. To me, it's a major issue, and this is why Judicial Watch, I can tell you, and because we're going to release it today, if it hasn't been already released, even as I speak, we're pressing states, including Illinois and California, and here in the District of Columbia, to clean up their voter rolls. And we know here in the District of Columbia, after we made some inquiries, they removed tens of thousands of people from the rolls just in the last few months, only because we said, what's going on there? So there are all sorts of things that can be done, and it's got to be a priority. And I asked about what I think are two big priorities. We can't let the Biden administration jail their political opponents without consequence. A republic depends on stopping that in many ways, I think. And our elections need to be saved in terms of their integrity. Are there other important issues? Yeah, our border, we're facing an invasion. We're killing our unborn children. We're mutilating children through transgender extremism. We have this race-based hatred and Marxism permeating our society. Those are the core issues, in my view, that are out there, in addition to being a banana republic through spending like the worst of the third world.
Yeah, I know. And every update we get on the banana republic justice system we have is more horrifying than the last. I mean, I saw earlier this week, Jack Smith's indictment against Trump is basically a screechy MSNBC segment. I mean, he's going after Donald Trump's every word and what he meant and how he was trying to steal the election. And it's crazy. It is just the craziest thing.
He wants to jail him for criticizing the Biden Justice Department. He called the January 6 prisoners political prisoners, and that's evidence that he should be jailed.
It's amazing. Justice Department abuses power, gets called out for it, and now that's the basis of committing a crime. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's evidence of a crime.
Tom Fitton, thank you as always, sir, for all of your excellent work. Ron DeSantis was right to thank you on the big stage last night, and we're grateful you're here today. Thank you, Tom.
Hey, thank you. Bye-bye.